Jack dreams of Earth as it existed long before the war, a world he has only ever known through old images and scattered records. In the dream, a woman looks at him and smiles, even though he is sure he has never met her before. Still, the feeling is strangely powerful. It does not feel like a random dream. It feels almost like something buried deep inside him, something real, like a memory trying to return. Then Jack wakes up in the present day, in the year 2077. It has been 5 years since his mandatory memory wipe, but those dreams still keep coming back. He and Victoria have been stationed on Earth for a mission that is now almost finished. In just 2 weeks, their assignment will be over, and they will finally be allowed to join the rest of humanity. But Jack and Victoria are not the same kind of people. Jack is restless, curious, and attached to the planet beneath him. Victoria is more disciplined, more focused, and far less interested in questioning anything. Years earlier, an alien race known as the Scavengers had destroyed Earth's moon. Their own world was dying, and they came to Earth looking to take over. But without the moon, the planet fell into disaster. Massive earthquakes, gigantic tsunamis, and global destruction tore civilization apart before the invasion even fully began. When humanity fought back, they used nuclear weapons and eventually won the war. But victory came at a terrible cost. Earth was left poisoned, broken, and nearly impossible to live on. The surviving humans abandoned the planet and built a massive station in space called the TET. It was meant to be a temporary home before humanity moved on to Titan, one of Saturn's moons. Most people have already gone there. Jack and Victoria remain behind only because Earth still has one important purpose. They protect the giant hydrorigs that draw water from the planet and convert it into energy. Without that energy, humanity's future cannot continue. But the scavengers who remain on Earth have not stopped fighting. They attack the drones, sabotage equipment, and create constant problems for the mission. Mission Control still considers Jack and Victoria an efficient team. Victoria handles communication from their tower base, while Jack works in the field, repairing drones and keeping the operation alive. Victoria is eager to leave for Titan and start the next stage of life. Jack, however, still feels connected to Earth. Even ruined and empty, it feels like home to him. As the day begins, Jack climbs into his aircraft for another routine patrol. He powers up the systems, checks in with Victoria, and lifts off into the sky. Soon, he confirms a visual on the hydrorigs below. Everything seems normal at first, but then Victoria alerts him that 2 drones have gone down. Mission Control comes online, and Victoria contacts the TET, reporting the situation to Sally. After receiving the information, she passes the details to Jack and connects his aircraft to the drone's beacon. Jack follows the signal into a storm. As he pushes through the dark clouds, lightning suddenly strikes his ship. For a moment, the aircraft goes out of control and drops toward the surface. Back at the tower, Victoria tries to convince Mission Control that they need new parts for several damaged drones. Instead, they are given their instructions for the day. Jack must repair drone 166 and locate drone 172. Meanwhile, Jack's aircraft continues spinning downward, dangerously close to smashing into the ground. At the last second, he regains control and pulls up just in time. After stabilizing, he reaches the location of the first damaged drone. Before he lands, Victoria scans the area for scavenger activity, but the storm and terrain limit her visibility. Jack touches down near the drone, grabs the tools he needs, and tells Victoria to keep an eye on him. As he begins repairing the machine and speaks to her through comms, unseen figures watch him from a distance. Victoria tells him the drone is too damaged to fix, but Jack refuses to give up so quickly. Using a piece of chewing gum as a quick solution, he manages to make the repair work. Just before the drone powers back on, Victoria notices movement on her monitors. Jack turns around, expecting danger, but sees only a dog. The drone activates, and Jack quickly scares the dog away before the machine mistakes it for a threat and kills it. He gives the drone his identification signal, and the machine accepts him without firing. Then it scans the area where the hidden watchers had been standing moments earlier before launching back into the sky. Afterward, Jack pauses for lunch and talks with Victoria about the scavengers. He feels they're becoming more aggressive. Victoria says it will not matter much longer, because once the 2 of them leave, the scavengers will have nothing left but dust and radiation. Jack decides to search for the second missing drone from the ground. He unloads his bike and rides across the dead landscape, passing through an area that was once covered in water. The signal from the missing drone is weak, but it appears to be somewhere ahead of him. He cannot see it at first. Then he discovers a deep sinkhole and guesses the drone may have fallen inside. He informs Victoria that he is going down to investigate. She warns him that the TET will go offline in 15 minutes, which means he will be on his own once communication is lost. Jack secures a rope to his bike and starts climbing down into the hole. From far away, the scavengers continue watching him. Victoria requests drone backup to Jack's location as he carefully lowers himself deeper into the sinkhole. He can hear the missing drone's signal and eventually spots something below, but his connection with control is already breaking up. As Jack moves closer, he nearly slips and falls. He steadies himself, then uses a fallen beam like a narrow bridge to reach the signal. When he finally gets there, he discovers only the beacon. The drone itself is gone. Suddenly, the scavengers spring their trap. They capture him and begin pulling him in, but Jack reacts fast. He shoots through their rope and breaks free. A few of them appear in the darkness, and Jack fires at them. Then they yank away the beam he used as a bridge, trying to trap him on the wrong side. Jack jumps across the gap just in time, with the scavengers closing in behind him. Once he reaches the other side, he clips himself onto his rope and starts pulling himself back up, but someone shoots the rope, snapping it. Jack falls back down into the sinkhole. For a moment, it looks like there is no way out. The scavengers move in around him, ready to finish the job. Then, without warning, a drone arrives. It scans the area and immediately opens fire, blasting through the sinkhole and wiping out the attackers. Drone 166 then turns its scanner toward Jack. For a 10-second, it does not recognize his ID right away. Jack stays still, waiting, until the drone finally accepts him. Before leaving, Jack notices a book lying on the ground. He picks it up and takes it with him. When he finally climbs back to the surface, he finds another problem waiting for him. His bike is gone. The scavengers have stolen it. Jack eventually makes it back to the tower, shaken but alive. Later, while he is in the shower, another image from the past slips into his mind. Once again, he sees New York, the city from his dreams, and the feeling is just as strange as before. It is not clear enough to explain, but it feels too personal to ignore. Afterward, he gets back to work and begins repairing one of the drones. While fixing it, he pulls out the book he found in the sinkhole and starts flipping through it. But before he can focus on it for long, Victoria interrupts him. She's preparing lunch as the sun slowly drops behind their sky tower, turning the world outside into a quiet, golden wasteland. Jack approaches her and gives her the flowers he has been carrying around. To him, they are something beautiful he managed to save from the dead earth below, but Victoria does not see them that way. She takes them outside and throws them away, warning him that they could be contaminated with toxins. During dinner, Jack tells her something that has been bothering him since the sinkhole. The scavengers, he says, were not trying to kill him. They were trying to capture him. Victoria lessens, but she does not want to turn it into something bigger than it is. To her, the mission is almost over, and anything that complicates it is a problem. Later, Victoria goes out to the pool, removes her clothes, and dives into the water. Jack follows her outside, but pauses at the edge instead of joining her right away. He asks if, before they leave Earth for good, she would come down to the surface with him just once. He wants her to see the planet the way he sees it, not just as a ruined assignment, but as something that still matters. Victoria does not answer in words. She reaches for him and pulls him into the pool. They kiss, then sink beneath the water together. But as they submerge, Jack suddenly sees the woman from his dreams again. Her face flashes through his mind, clear and haunting, and the moment with Victoria becomes tangled with a memory he cannot understand. Later, Jack wakes up in bed and notices a huge explosion burning in the distance. He immediately gets up and heads out to investigate. When he reaches the area, he discovers that one of the hydro rigs has been destroyed. Jack suspects the scavengers may have somehow turned one of the drones into a weapon. While checking the site, he detects a strange rogue signal being sent away from Earth. Without wasting time, he follows it. The source leads him to the remains of what used to be the top of the Empire State Building. Jack goes in on foot, and as he moves through the wreckage, he sees surroundings that match the place from his dreams. The signal is still active nearby. Jack follows the sound of the beacon and moves deeper through the ruins, noticing old objects scattered across the ground. The beacon has been using the structure like an antenna, and Victoria works from the tower to decrypt what it is transmitting. The message turns out to be a set of coordinates, pointing to a remote location in the middle of nowhere. Jack shuts the beacon down and continues with his patrol. As he flies on, he gets dangerously close to the radiation zone border. Before returning home, he performs a final perimeter check and then cuts off communication. With Victoria no longer listening, Jack flies into a hidden ravine. Inside, it is a peaceful little place untouched by the destruction around it. He lands beside a small house near a lake, a private refuge he has clearly been visiting for some time. He turns on the lights and adds the small items he has collected to the home's little collection of relics. Then he puts on a Led Zeppelin record and steps outside, letting the music fill the quiet air. For a while, he simply enjoys the place. The lake, the grass, the silence, the feeling of something real. He thinks about how much he will miss this hidden corner of Earth when the mission ends and he has to leave. Eventually, Jack falls asleep on the grass. As he sleeps, the dream returns. He sees the same woman again, standing with him near the Empire State Building, smiling like she knows him. Then something interrupts the calm. Jack spots an unknown object falling from the sky. He immediately takes off to investigate. Victoria tracks the crash location and tells him where it came down. The object appears to have landed exactly at the coordinates sent by the beacon. Mission Control is close to going offline, but before that happens, Victoria reports the situation. Sally responds from the TET and tells them Jack should stand down. Drones have already been sent to the crash site. But Jack ignores the order. Something about this feels wrong, and he needs to see it for himself. As he approaches the crash zone, he reports that the object looks human and pre-war. Jack lands and moves in carefully. There, among the wreckage, he finds hibernation pods. Inside them are human beings still alive. Jack contacts Victoria and tells her he has found 5 human survivors. Then he checks the final pod. Inside is the woman from his dreams. Before Jack can process what he is seeing, the drones arrive and begin destroying the pods. Jack orders them to stop, but they ignore him. Drone 166 turns toward him as well and prepares to engage. For a tense moment, it scans him. His ID clears, but the drone still moves to eliminate the pod. Jack refuses to let that happen. He shields the pod and fires at the drone, forcing it away and disabling its attack. From the distance, the scavengers watch everything unfold, still hidden, still observing. Jack barely manages to get his aircraft back to the tower. When he arrives, he climbs out and drags the pod with him. Victoria opens the door, shocked by what he has brought home. Together, they open the pod. Victoria tells Jack to get the med kit, but she also insists that they need to report this immediately. Jack warns her about what the drones did to the other survivors. Before they can decide what to do, the woman suddenly wakes up. She coughs and vomits out the fluid from the hibernation chamber, struggling to breathe. Then she collapses into Jack's arms and says his name. Later, once she is fully awake, she asks where she is. Victoria introduces herself and Jack. The woman tells them her name is Julia. Victoria explains that there was a crash and tells her about her crew, but Julia appears confused and disoriented. She asks how long she has been asleep. Jack tells her the truth, 60 years. The 3 of them sit down to eat, and Jack begins asking Julia questions about the beacon and her mission. Julia says she needs to recover the flight recorder from her ship. Victoria quickly points out that Earth has changed a lot in the last 6 decades. She and Jack explain the alien invasion, the war, and how the rest of humanity is either on the space station or already preparing for life near Saturn. As they talk, Julia notices Jack and Victoria holding hands. She gives a small laugh, catching the tension between them. Victoria becomes visibly uncomfortable around her. She does not trust Julia, and she clearly does not like how strongly Jack seems affected by her presence. Later, Jack and Victoria speak privately. Victoria wants Julia gone. She sees her as a danger to their mission and to their future. Jack, however, asks Victoria whether she remembers anything from before their assignment. He asks if she remembers Julia at all. Victoria becomes angry. She reminds him that a scavenger beacon brought Julia's ship down, and now the scavengers know where they live. To her, Julia is not a mystery to solve. She is a threat. Later that night, Julia is still awake when Jack comes to see her. He tells her that Victoria is going to report her presence to the TET, and someone will be sent down for her. Julia insists that she has to get the flight recorder from the crash site. She says both of them need to know what really happened. Jack agrees to take her. As they leave, Victoria warns him that she will not be able to protect him if something goes wrong. Jack goes anyway. When he and Julia reach the crash site, Victoria watches them through the aircraft's camera system from the tower. Julia sees the destroyed pods, and Jack quietly tells her he could not save the others. She searches through the wreckage for the recorder, desperate for answers. Meanwhile, Victoria notices movement on her monitors. Someone is nearby. She tries to warn them, but the communication fails just as Julia continues looking for the recording. Jack finally retrieves the flight recorder, but before he can react further, scavengers suddenly emerge from the shadows. They knock him off his feet, forcing him to send the vessel away, and then they strike him unconscious. Both Jack and Julia are captured and taken somewhere unknown. The next day, Victoria's vessel returns to the tower. Mission Control comes online, but Victoria only receives partial information. Jack went off communication, nothing more. She requests a drone to survey the last known location where he vanished. Jack awakens, restrained, a harsh light cutting across his face. a voice begins reciting lines from the book he discovered earlier. Out of the darkness, a man lights a cigar and explains that he's been observing Jack, noting his curiosity and tendency to question things. Jack insists that they won't get anything from him. His memories have been wiped. The man challenges him, asking whether he has ever truly encountered a scavenger, ventured into the radiation zones, or probed too far. The light switches on fully, revealing an entire building populated by humans. Confused, Jack listens as the man, Beach, clarifies. These people are all human, but they must remain hidden from the drones, which are programmed to kill them on sight. Beach presses Jack about protecting Julia from a drone. Jack replies simply that anyone would have done the same. Sykes then approaches, warning that a drone is tracking Jack. They release his restraints and help him to his feet. Meanwhile, Victoria monitors drone data from the tower and confirms with Sally that the signal she sees belongs to Jack. Beach takes Jack down to the scavenger ground facility. He explains that Julia's ship was brought down intentionally to salvage its reactor. Along with fuel cells from captured drones, it can be transformed into a nuclear device. One of the drones could carry it, but only Jack has the clearance and ability to program it. At the same time, the rogue drone is tracking Jack's DNA, leading it to the hiding site. Beach instructs Jack to program the drone to deliver the nuke to the heart of the TET, ending the war once and for all. Jack refuses, and Sykes immediately fires a warning shot. Then Julia is brought in, and her life is used as leverage to coerce him. Before the plan can escalate further, alarms blare. A drone approaches the facility and scans the area. It attacks the scavengers, taking out several, until Sykes destroys it. Victoria confirms via mission control that the drone is offline and requests 2 reinforcements. Jack insists to Beach that the same is happening, and the scavengers, seeing the situation, are ready to retreat. Before leaving, Beach cryptically tells Jack that the truth can be found in one of the radiation zones. Jack and Julia make their way to the Empire State Building. He sends Victoria a quick message confirming he's alive, and she informs Mission Control so that any remaining drones are called off. She dispatches the vessel to them as backup. While waiting, Jack presses Julia for the truth about her mission. She explains that her original assignment was a research flight to Titan. Weeks before launch, their sensors detected an alien object, which led to reassignment. They were tasked to investigate the TET itself. Then Julia drops the bombshell. She is Jack's wife, and he is not who he believes himself to be. She reminds him that he proposed to her at the very spot where they now stand. Jack remembers fragments of the moment, though it's hazy, disorienting. The vessel finally arrives, and Victoria observes Jack and Julia embracing. They attempt to return home, but Victoria refuses to let them enter. Jack insists they must leave immediately, stressing that Julia is his wife. Against his protests, Victoria informs the TET about Julia's presence. Suddenly, one of the drones at their home activates. Jack calls to Julia to escape with him, but she hesitates, unable to fully trust the situation. The drone attacks and kills Victoria. Before it can reach Jack, Julia takes action, destroying the threat. Jack finally communicates with the TET. It informs him that it wants to bring both him and Julia in to assign a new mission. They depart, but drones are sent in pursuit, initiating a long, grueling chase. Jack maneuvers through a violent storm, using lightning strikes to delay their pursuers. They hide behind a waterfall, evading some drones. Then Jack surprises 2 of them from behind, destroying both. One resilient drone nearly crashes their ship, but Jack skillfully outmaneuvers it and neutralizes it. Unfortunately, Drone 166 continues pursuit and forces them into the radiation zone. It collides with their ship, destroying it, and Jack pulls the emergency escape lever. They are left stranded in the irradiated wasteland. From a distance, Jack hears another drone. As he investigates, he notices another vessel, identical to his own, landing nearby. Unable to see the occupant clearly, he decides to approach. Peering through his scope, he realizes with shock that it's himself, another Jack. The other Jack orders him to drop his weapon. He insists they must destroy the rogue drone together. Julia intervenes, revealing that the second Jack also remembers her. A fierce struggle ensues, first with firearms and then hand-to-hand combat. Ultimately, the original Jack, designated 49, overpowers the second Jack, 52, incapacitating him. Suddenly, Drone 166 powers back online. Jack 49 reacts immediately, moving in before it can attack, and rips out its fuel cell, shutting the machine down for good. Then he calls out for Julia. There is no answer at first, and panic sets in. He finds her nearby and realizes she has been shot during the chaos. Jack rushes to her, lifts her into his arms, and carries her away from the open ground. Once she is safe, he restrains Jack 52 so he cannot follow. then takes 52's aircraft and flies it toward the other tower. When Jack enters 52's home, he is struck by how familiar everything feels. The place is nearly identical to his own, like a life copied and repeated with only tiny differences. He quickly searches the room, finds the medical kit, and gathers the supplies he needs for Julia. But before he can leave, Victoria 52 catches him. For a tense moment, she realizes something is not quite right. Jack stays calm and manages to convince her that he is her version of Jack. She believes him enough to let the moment pass, but when he tries once again to make her come down to earth with him, this Victoria refuses too. Just like the Victoria he knew, she cannot let go of the mission or the life she has been told to believe in. Jack returns to Julia, but by then, Jack 52 has escaped from his restraints. There is no time to chase him. Jack focuses on Julia instead, treating her wound as carefully as he can. Once she is stable, he gets her into the aircraft and takes her to his hidden house by the lake. Later, Julia wakes up there, healed and safe. She slowly looks around the place, taking in the small home Jack created for himself away from the tower, away from the mission, away from all the lies. She finds his favorite record and starts playing it. The music fills the room, warm and familiar. She steps outside and joins Jack near the lake. He tells her the truth he has now accepted. He knows he is not the original Jack Harper. He knows he is a copy, one of many, but he also tells her that his feelings for her are real. As far back as he can remember, he has loved her. Julia listens gently and tells him that in the end, a person is shaped by their memories. What someone remembers, what they carries inside, what they choose to become, that is what makes them who they are. And for her, this Jack is not just a machine-made copy. He is Jack. By the next morning, Jack understands what he has to do. He prepares himself for the final step. He has decided to help Beach destroy the TAT, and Julia is going with him. Together, they return to the human hiding place. Beach is relieved to see that Jack has finally chosen to stand with them. Meanwhile, high above Earth, the TET reviews old footage from Jack's earlier visit and identifies his data. Realizing what is happening, it sends 3 drones after the survivors. Inside the Resistance base, Jack begins programming the captured drone for the mission. While he works, Beach tells him the truth about the war. He says he was there when everything began. He saw the moon destroyed. He watched the planet fall apart. He saw people starve, cities collapse, and humanity nearly disappear. Then came the final betrayal. The TET did not simply invade with ordinary alien soldiers. It used troops that all looked like Jack Harper, copies of the astronaut who had been taken long ago. Their memories had been erased, and they were programmed to hunt down and kill the remaining humans on Earth. Beach explains that the TET is not a savior, not a station, and not a home. It is a powerful machine that moves from world to world, draining planets of their energy and leaving ruin behind. For years, humanity has been fighting something far colder and more intelligent than they ever understood. Beach says he first started to believe Jack might be different when he saw him pick up the book. Later, when Jack protected Julia from the drone, Beach became certain. There was still something human inside him. That is why they tried to bring him in. They needed him to remember enough to help them finish the fight. Jack finishes activating the drone. Beach looks at the plan and says he wishes he could be inside the TET when the bomb goes off, just to see the machine realize what is happening. It would be a one-way trip, but to him, it would be worth it. The Resistance prepares the drone for its final mission. The gates open, but the TET's drones have already arrived. 3 drones storm into the base and unleash destruction. The humans fight back with everything they have, but the machines are fast, armored, and merciless. People fall as the drones tear through the hideout. Beach manages to destroy one of them, but not before it injures him and destroys the drone carrying the nuclear device. Sykes takes down the second drone. Jack destroys the third, but when the smoke clears, the truth is brutal. Their plan is ruined. The drone that was supposed to deliver the bomb is gone. Julia quickly comes up with another idea. The TET still wants Jack to bring her in. It asked for the survivor. So Jack can take a hibernation pod, pretend Julia is inside it, and carry the nuclear device directly to the TET himself. Jack and Julia understand what this means. They share a quiet goodbye in front of a painting that reminds Julia of home. There is no dramatic speech, only the heavy silence of 2 people who know this may be their last moment together. They prepare a pod with the explosive device. Jack helps Julia lie down inside another pod and tells her to dream of them. Then he closes it gently. He takes the pod containing the bomb to his aircraft and sets a course for the TET. During the flight, Jack plays the flight recording from Julia's ship. As the voices come through, his lost memories finally return in full. He remembers that he was the commander of that mission. Sally was not some artificial voice from Mission Control back then. She was the real NASA controller guiding them from Earth. Victoria was his co-pilot. The rest of the crew, including Julia, were asleep in hibernation. In the present, Jack approaches the TET and tells it he is bringing the survivor. The TET grants him permission to enter. Back in his recovered memory, Jack remembers the original approach to the alien object. Their ship was pulled toward it, and when he realized they were being drawn in, he made a desperate decision. He ejected the hibernation module, sending Julia and the rest of the crew away to safety. But Jack and Victoria remained in the command section and were taken into the TET. Now, decades later, Jack enters it again. The TET sends drones toward him, but Jack convinces it to let him come closer. As he moves deeper inside, he sees the horrifying scale of what has been done. Countless clones of himself and Victoria are stored there, waiting to be used. The TET welcomes him home as he lands near its core. Jack opens the pod, but Julia is not inside. Beach is. At the same time, Julia's real pod opens far away at the lake house. She wakes up and realizes Jack brought her there instead. He never intended to let her die with him. Meanwhile, TET drones close in on the remaining human survivors on Earth. Inside the TET, Jack and Beach activate the nuclear device together. The explosion tears through the massive machine, destroying it from within. In the same moment, all of its drones across Earth shut down and fall. The threat that has controlled the planet for so long is finally gone. From the surface, Sykes and Julia watch the TET explode in the sky. 3 years pass. Julia now lives at the lake house with her young daughter. The place that was once Jack's secret refuge has become a real home. One day, figures appear near the lake. The surviving humans have found her, and among them is Jack 52. He has made his way back to the place that matters most. Jack has finally come home to his wife and child. You know, I have to say, the first thing that hits you about Oblivion is just how pretty it looks. Like really, it's stunning. From the very first shot of that post-apocalyptic Earth, you almost forget that the story hasn't even started yet. The landscapes, the ruined cities, the way the sunlight hits the floating platforms, it's all cinematic candy. I mean, you could literally pause the movie and hang it on your wall, but here's the thing. As beautiful as it is, there's this nagging feeling that you've seen it all before. And not just in a that looks familiar way. I mean, the whole vibe, the visual tone, even some of the plot beats. It's like the film is wearing a borrowed coat. You get this sense immediately that the movie wants to feel epic and fresh, but underneath, it's treading very familiar ground. Still, that's part of the charm in a weird way. Watching it feels comfortable. You know the type of story you're in for, but the visuals are so compelling that you're willing to go along for the ride. It's flashy, sure, but it also knows exactly how to grab your eyes. And honestly, for the first 10 minutes, I was completely hooked, just staring, taking it all in, and trying not to drool over the sheer scale of it. So yeah, Oblivion kicks off with a bang visually. It's gorgeous, sleek, and totally watchable. But if you're looking for a story that feels brand new, something that hits you with jaw-dropping originality right out of the gate, well, that's where things start to get a little more complicated. So the basic setup of Oblivion is actually pretty interesting, at least on paper. We're in the year 2077. Earth has been through the worst-case scenario. There was a war with alien invaders. The planet got wrecked, humanity supposedly won, but winning didn't really mean saving the place. Earth is basically treated like a dead world now. Most of the human race has left, or at least that's what we're told, and the future of mankind is somewhere far away on Titan. And then we have Jack Harper, played by Tom Cruise. Jack isn't some general leading an army or a chosen one warrior standing in front of explosions every 5 seconds. At first, he's basically a maintenance guy. A very handsome, very athletic, very Tom Cruise maintenance guy, but still. His job is to fly around this ruined planet, repair drones, protect these giant resource machines, and make sure the remaining alien scavengers don't interfere with the operation. Up above it all, he lives in this clean, glassy, futuristic outpost with Victoria, played by Andrea Riseborough. She handles communications, watches the mission, gives him updates, keeps everything organized. Their life is neat, cold, efficient. Wake up, check in, fly down, fix the drones, come back, repeat. It almost feels less like survival and more like working a very expensive corporate job at the end of the world. And both of them are waiting for the same thing, the mission to end, so they can leave Earth behind and join the rest of humanity. But Jack is the problem in that perfect little system, because he doesn't fully want to leave. That's where the movie starts to get more interesting. Jack has had his memory wiped, supposedly for security reasons, but pieces of something are still floating around in his head. Dreams, images, a woman he doesn't understand. A version of Earth that feels alive, not dead. And instead of treating the planet like a job site, he treats it like a place that still means something. He collects old objects. He hides away in a little cabin. He listens to music. He holds onto pieces of the past like they're proof that the world was more than just a battlefield and a resource dump. Then Julia enters the story. Jack finds her after a spacecraft crashes back to Earth, and her arrival basically cracks the movie open. Suddenly, the clean mission briefing doesn't feel so clean anymore. The things Jack has been told don't line up. The so-called scavs may not be what he thinks they are. His dreams may not just be dreams. And the war, the memory wipe, the mission, Victoria, Titan, all of it starts to feel less like truth and more like a story someone carefully built around him. That's the hook of Oblivion. It's not just man fights aliens on a ruined Earth. It's more like what happens when the last man doing his job starts realizing the job itself might be a lie. And honestly, that's a strong foundation. It gives the movie mystery, romance, identity, paranoia, and that classic sci-fi feeling of a man standing inside a machine he doesn't fully understand yet. The setup has weight. It has atmosphere. It gives you enough questions to keep watching. The issue, of course, is whether the movie can answer those questions as well as it asks them. But at this stage, early on, the premise does its job. It pulls you in. It makes you wonder what's real, what's been erased, and why Jack seems to remember a life he was never supposed to have. Now, before the movie really gets moving, we have to talk about that opening narration. Because Oblivion does that very sci-fi thing where it sits you down in the first few minutes and basically says, all right, here's the world, here's the war, here's what happened to Earth, here's what Jack does, here's where humanity went, here are the rules, please keep up. And look, sometimes voiceover works. Sometimes it gives a movie this haunted, reflective quality, but here, it feels a little too neat. A little too much like someone handing you the instruction manual before you've even touched the machine. Jack explains the war. He explains the scavs. He explains the mission. He explains the memory wipe. He explains the big resource operation. And while all of that information matters, the way it's delivered makes the opening feel heavier than it should. Instead of letting us discover this ruined Earth through Jack's daily life, the movie kind of front-loads everything. It's not terrible. It doesn't ruin the film, but it does take some air out of the mystery. Because when you're watching a world this visually striking, you naturally want to explore it. You want to ask questions. You want to look at the destroyed skyline, the empty stadiums, the machines floating over the ocean, and slowly piece things together yourself. But the narration keeps stepping in like a tour guide who won't stop talking. And the odd thing is, some of that same information comes back again later. So you get this feeling of, wait, didn't we already go through this? The movie wants to be mysterious, but it also keeps explaining itself. That's a tricky balance, and I'm not sure it always gets it right. A more subtle opening might have worked better. Show Jack repairing a drone. Show Victoria watching from above. Show the silence of Earth. Show the danger. Show the routine. Let us feel the loneliness before telling us what caused it. Because the best thing about Oblivion early on is not the information. It's the mood. It's that strange emptiness. Jack flying across a dead planet, acting like this is just another day at work. That image already tells us so much. But the narration doesn't fully trust the audience to read the room, and that's where the problem starts. The film has this huge, mysterious, beautifully designed world, but instead of letting us sink into it naturally, it explains the setup in a way that feels too polished, too direct, and maybe a little too safe. Still, once the narration backs off and the movie actually lets Jack move through the world, things improve. You start to feel the isolation. You start to notice the cracks in his routine. You start to wonder why this man seems less like someone completing a mission and more like someone quietly remembering a life he was ordered to forget. Visually, though, this is where Oblivion really earns its place. Whatever issues the story has, and there are definitely issues, the movie is gorgeous. Not just good for a blockbuster gorgeous. I mean genuinely, sit up and pay attention gorgeous. The kind of film where even if you're not fully invested in what someone is saying, your eyes are still busy enjoying the frame. The strange thing is, Earth is supposed to be dead, broken, used up, not really a home anymore. But the movie somehow makes this ruined planet look beautiful in a way that almost feels wrong. You're looking at a world that has been devastated, and yet half the time it looks like the most expensive travel commercial ever made for a place nobody can visit. The empty landscapes stretch forever. The destroyed landmarks have this quiet, eerie weight to them. The sky feels huge. The silence feels huge. And Jack flying across all of it in that sleek little craft gives the movie this lonely, almost dreamlike atmosphere. That's probably the strongest emotional hook in the early part of the film. Not the exposition, not the mission briefing, not even the mystery yet. It's the feeling of being alone on a planet that used to belong to everyone. And the CGI helps a lot because it doesn't constantly scream, "Look at me, I'm CGI." The effects blend into the world smoothly enough that you stop inspecting them and just accept the place. The broken earth, the giant machines, the drones, the empty ruins, they all feel like parts of the same environment. It's polished but not weightless. There's a real sense of scale, too. Jack looks tiny against the world around him, and that matters. The movie keeps reminding you that this isn't just a man doing repairs. He's moving through the remains of human history. Stadiums, cities, monuments, landscapes, all of it has been reduced to scenery for a job he barely understands. And honestly, even when the story starts wobbling later, that atmosphere carries a lot of the experience. You may question the plot, you may see some of the twists coming, you may wonder why certain things don't quite add up, but it's hard to deny the pull of the imagery. There's something weirdly calming about the film's destruction. It's not chaotic all the time. It's not just gray rubble and explosions. It's clean, wide, quiet, almost peaceful. That gives Oblivion a different texture from a lot of post-apocalyptic movies. The world has ended, sure, but the movie doesn't present it as constant panic. It presents it like a memory fading slowly in the sun. And that's when the film is at its best, when it stops explaining and just lets you look. Jack crossing the wasteland, the ruins sitting there like ghosts, the machines humming in the distance. That lonely beauty does more for the movie than some of the dialogue ever does. So yes, if you're coming to Oblivion just for visual atmosphere, there's a lot to admire. It creates a ruined future that feels expensive, elegant, and strangely haunting. The problem is that a movie can't survive on beauty alone, but for a while, Oblivion comes closer than most. The production design in Oblivion is one of those things that almost does more storytelling than the script itself. Jack and Victoria's home, for example, is ridiculously sleek. It's all glass, white surfaces, clean lines, smooth edges, everything looking like it was designed by someone who has never once spilled coffee in their life. There's no clutter, no warmth, no mess. It's beautiful, obviously, but it's also kind of cold, like a luxury apartment built inside a corporate brochure, and that fits Victoria perfectly. She belongs in that space. Her clothes, her posture, the way she moves through the control room, everything about her feels connected to order. She's loyal to the mission, loyal to the routine, loyal to the voice coming from above. Even her wardrobe has that same clean, controlled feeling. White, gray, sharp, precise. She looks like someone who has accepted the system so completely that she's become part of its design. Jack is different. He wears the uniform, sure, but he never seems fully at home in it. There's always this small resistance in him, not loud or rebellious in a dramatic way, but quietly there. He keeps old things. He hides things. He changes clothes when he can. He escapes to that little lakeside cabin like a man sneaking back into his own soul. And that cabin is important because it feels like the opposite of everything above it. The outpost is sterile. The cabin is warm, the outpost is controlled. The cabin is personal. Up there, everything looks untouched, polished, almost inhuman. Down there, Jack has books, music, random objects, pieces of a world that supposedly doesn't matter anymore. It's not just a hideout. It's the one place in the movie where Earth still feels like Earth. Then you have the technology, and honestly, a lot of it is just cool to look at. The ship Jack flies has this clean, toy-like elegance to it. The drones are simple but intimidating, almost cute for half a second before they start killing everything in sight. The control screens, the weapons, the floating base, the pool, and yes, that pool deserves its own little mention because the movie knows exactly how impressive that image is. It's pure sci-fi luxury, floating above the ruins of civilization like the world's most expensive bad idea. Even the motorcycle has personality. That folding bike feels like something out of a futuristic travel kit, and it gives Jack's movement across the wasteland a little bit of style beyond just flying from one damaged drone to another. What I like is that the design isn't only there to look expensive. A lot of it tells you who these people are and what kind of world they've accepted. The clean tech represents obedience, efficiency, control. The darker, dirtier world of the scavs pushes against that completely. Their gear looks rough, aged, angry, almost animal-like. Whether the story fully earns that contrast is another question, but visually, you understand the divide immediately. That's where Joseph Kosinski's background really shows. The spaces feel planned. The machines feel functional. Even when the story is borrowing from older sci-fi, the world itself has a very deliberate shape. You can tell someone cared about the architecture of this future, and sometimes that care is enough to keep you watching, because when the plot starts getting messy, you're still studying the frame. You're looking at Victoria's workstation, Jack's aircraft, the sterile kitchen, the ruined ground below, the little objects he keeps hidden away. The movie keeps giving your eyes things to hold on to. For me, that's one of the reasons Oblivion remains watchable even when it isn't fully satisfying. The world has texture, not always emotional texture, maybe, but visual texture. It understands how design can create mood, how costumes can suggest personality, how a room can tell you whether someone is free or trapped. And in a movie this obsessed with memory, control, and identity, that matters. The production design quietly says what the dialogue sometimes struggles to say. Jack is living inside. A perfect system, but something human in him keeps reaching for the imperfect world below. Now let's talk about the cinematography and visual effects, because this is another area where Oblivion really flexes. Claudio Miranda, who shot this thing, knows how to frame a scene. The shots of Earth from above, the drones moving across the sky, Jack flying his little craft over the ruined landscape, every frame is almost like a painting. It's the kind of work where you pause the movie just to admire how someone managed to make a destroyed world feel alive. And yeah, it's destroyed, but it's still breathtaking. That contrast between ruin and beauty is constant, and it works. Then there's the CGI, which honestly blends in perfectly. Usually with these big sci-fi flicks, you get moments where something screams computer-generated, and it takes you right out of the movie. Not here. The drones, the floating base, the ships, even some of the scenery, all of it feels tangible. Like you can believe that a human could actually be standing there and that those machines could really exist. It's a neat trick, actually, because it makes the post-apocalyptic Earth feel real without ever becoming grimy or overly dark. There's this seamless mix between practical sets and digital effects. You can tell Kaczynski knew exactly when to use a real prop or a location and when to lean on CGI, and the results are smooth. The film never draws attention to itself for being flashy. It just lets you sit in the world. And those drones, they deserve their own shout-out. They look simple at first, almost cute in their efficiency, but there's this underlying menace in the way they move. That combination of sleek design and real danger makes the action sequences more effective because your brain buys it. You feel like these little machines could actually hunt someone down. What's also impressive is the scale. Jack is often tiny against the environment. Stadiums, cities, ruins, machines, they dwarf him in every shot. It reminds you just how small humans are in the grand scheme of this world, which is a quiet way of building tension without even firing a shot. And the cinematography plays with color too. The sterile white of Jack in Victoria's outpost contrasts sharply with the darker, grittier tones of the Scav world. Even in Jack's hidden lakeside cabin, the warmer natural palette makes it feel like a secret haven, a little pocket of life in a broken world. All of these choices add subtle layers to the story without a single word being spoken. Honestly, even when the plot starts to wobble or the story gets confusing, the visuals carry you. Watching Oblivion is like wandering through a gallery of a future that doesn't exist but feels disturbingly plausible. And that's the kind of immersion a lot of sci-fi movies can't pull off. Here, the cinematography and CGI don't just show the world, they make you live in it, even if only for 124 minutes. So yeah, the story may have its flaws, but visually, this movie is a full-on treat for the eyes. And for me, that's enough to keep coming back to it, even if some of the other pieces don't fully land. Alright, let's talk about the soundtrack and sound design, because this is one of those areas where Oblivion quietly shines. First off, the music. The score by Mady3, backed a bit by Anthony Gonzalez and Joseph Trapanese, is just gorgeous. It's one of those scores that sneaks up on you. You might not even notice it at first, but it's constantly shaping how you feel about the world Jack is living in. There's this dreamy, ethereal quality that makes the empty landscapes feel alive. It's lonely, sure, but in a way that's almost comforting, like you're floating alongside him rather than watching him from afar. And then there's how the music connects to Jack personally. Those little moments in his lakeside cabin, listening to Ramble On by Led Zeppelin or other classic tracks, are perfect. It's subtle, but it tells you that Jack isn't just a drone operator. He's holding on to a piece of the world that once existed. That music becomes almost a character in itself, giving the audience a tether to the past, and letting you feel the human side of this otherwise sterile post-apocalyptic setting. Sound design overall is solid too. The drones have this quiet menace, just enough whirring, swooshing, mechanical hums to make you tense without overdoing it. Even the little touches, like the soft sounds of the environment, wind across the barren plains, the hum of the floating station, they all layer together to make the world feel alive. It's immersive without ever feeling like the movie is yelling at you. And honestly, if the story sometimes falters, the music and soundscape make you forgive a lot of it. You're carried along by the tone, the rhythm, the subtle emotional nudges in every scene. It's a reminder that Oblivion isn't just about visual spectacle, it's a sensory experience. So yeah, when people rave about how gorgeous the movie looks, I'd argue the soundtrack deserves equal attention. Mady3 and the sound team give the film a heartbeat, and without it, the empty streets, the floating platforms, even Jack's solitary moments might feel hollow. Here, it all resonates. It's one of the quiet things that sticks with you long after the credits roll. All right, let's talk about Tom Cruise, because in Oblivion, he really is the glue that holds the whole thing together. Now, this isn't the kind of role where Cruise is running through explosions every 2 minutes, though there's a little of that. No, here he's mostly a guy in a high-tech suit, flying drones, repairing machines, staring across a ruined Earth, and thinking about things he's not supposed to remember. And for a lot of the movie, he's basically alone. It's a very physical performance, but it's subtle in its own way. He has to carry all the emotion of the story without a big supporting cast to lean on. And you know what? He does it. Cruise has this ability to make you care about a character, even when the plot is a little messy or the story is telling you too much. His Jack Harper isn't just an action hero. It's a man quietly wrestling with memory, isolation, and the faint echo of a life he's been ordered to forget. There's this intensity in the way he moves through the world, how he reacts to the unexpected, how he holds on to tiny things like relics, music, and memories. You believe he feels all of that, even if the movie doesn't always give him the script to fully express it. That said, it's still Tom Cruise. He's charismatic, focused, reliable, but let's be honest, he's never going to suddenly disappear into a role. He's very much himself, which works here because Jack is, in a way, a quintessential Cruise character. Determined, capable, a little heroic, and quietly human under the futuristic suit. Some reviewers argue he's a bit too clean-cut for the world he's in, and maybe they're right. But personally, I think it suits the film's sleek aesthetic. What's really interesting is that Cruise makes you feel the loneliness of Jack without needing a lot of dialogue. Just watching him fly over the ruins, landing on a destroyed building, fixing a drone, or sneaking off to his hidden cabin, you get a sense of the stakes, of the isolation, and of how much Jack cares about the world in a way nobody else seems to. And of course, he's supported by the other cast, but they're mostly secondary. Riceborough and Kurylenko do great work, sure, but Cruise carries the emotional weight. He's the lens through which we experience this future. Without him, the movie probably wouldn't work at all. So yeah, Cruise isn't reinventing acting here, and he's certainly playing in familiar territory. But he's so committed, so focused, and so steady that even when the story wobbles, you're invested. Jack Harper is very much Tom Cruise, but for this movie, that's exactly what you want. All right, let's talk about the supporting cast, because while Tom Cruise carries most of the weight, there's a lot of talent around him, even if the script doesn't always let it shine. Andrea Riceborough as Victoria is probably the standout here. She has this quiet strength and elegance, and you can tell she's thinking and feeling more than the dialogue lets on. She has the composure of someone perfectly tuned to the mission, and it's fun to watch her react to Jack in subtle ways. She's beautiful, sure, but she's also capable of conveying loyalty, conflict, and curiosity without needing a ton of lines. Olga Kurylenko as Julia is another interesting case. She's mysterious, alluring, and plays that unknown variable perfectly, but her character doesn't get a lot of time to breathe outside the plot's twists. You know there's depth there, but the movie is more interested in the ideas she represents than her as a full person. Morgan Freeman pops in as Malcolm Beach, and honestly, you can't help but notice his presence. He's calm, commanding, and the kind of actor who could carry a scene with minimal effort. But again, the material doesn't demand much from him. He's there to drop knowledge, guide Jack, and then mostly step aside. It's a little frustrating because you want to see more of him. Then you've got Nicolaj Coster-Waldau and Melissa Leo, who are fine, but their roles are so small that they feel more like window dressing than anything substantial. Even Zoe Bell's cameo is fun, but brief, more for style points than plot weight. The thing with this supporting cast is that everyone looks great, delivers solid performances, and has the screen presence to do a lot, but the script and story don't really give them the chance. They're underused, which is a shame because when you have talent like this, you want them to interact, to bring the world to life, to make you care about what happens to them. So yes, the supporting cast is good, really good. But Oblivion keeps most of the focus on Cruise, which means the rest of the ensemble mostly serves as elegant decoration rather than fully fleshed out characters. It's one of those times when you look at a movie and think, wow, they could have done so much more with all this talent. And this is where Oblivion starts to feel a little distant. Not bad, not empty exactly, just emotionally sealed off, in the same way its futuristic rooms are sealed off. Everything is clean, controlled, beautifully arranged, but you don't always feel the warmth underneath. Jack's story has real potential. A man with erased memories, strange dreams, a hidden attachment to Earth, and this quiet feeling that his entire life might be built on a lie. That's strong material. You can build a great character study from that, and Tom Cruise does what he can with it. He gives Jack focus, physical energy, and just enough uncertainty to make you believe something is breaking inside him. But the movie doesn't always slow down in the right places. It gives us the mystery of Jack, yes, but not always the emotional weight of Jack. We see what he does. We understand what he wants. We know he's drawn to the past, to Julia, to the planet, to the little pieces of humanity he keeps hidden away. But there are moments where you want the film to dig deeper, to let him sit with that confusion a little longer, instead of moving quickly toward the next reveal. And the supporting characters have it even harder. Victoria, for example, is fascinating in concept. She's loyal, polished, controlled, and clearly uncomfortable whenever Jack starts drifting away from the mission. There's something tragic there, honestly, but the movie keeps her boxed into the role she needs to play for the plot. Julia has a similar problem. She matters enormously to the story, but as a person, the film doesn't give her enough space beyond what she means to Jack. So the relationships work more as ideas than as fully lived-in emotional bonds. The love story should hit harder than it does. It has all the pieces: memory, loss, longing, recognition, two people connected across a broken world. That sounds powerful, but on screen, it sometimes feels more like the movie telling us this connection is meaningful rather than letting us feel it grow naturally. That's not to say there's no emotion here. There is. Jack's attachment to Earth works. His cabin works. The old records, the books, the little objects he saves, those things say more about him than some of the dialogue does. In those quieter details, you feel the humanity the movie is reaching for. But overall, there's a gap between the emotional idea and the emotional impact. You admire Oblivion more than you feel it. You can see the tragedy, the romance, the identity crisis, the loneliness. You understand why it should move you. But understanding something and feeling it are not the same thing. And that's the frustrating part, because the film is built around huge emotional questions. Who are you if your memories are taken away? What makes a place home? Can love survive when identity itself has been rewritten? These are not small ideas, but the movie often treats them like stepping stones toward the next plot twist. So by the time the story starts asking for bigger emotional investment, some viewers may still be standing at a distance, watching the machinery work, admiring the design, but not fully getting pulled into the heart of it. That's why Oblivion can feel impressive and strangely hollow at the same time. It is feeling inside it. It just doesn't always know how to let that feeling breathe. Now let's talk about the story itself, because this is one of those movies where the potential is definitely there. It's just a little unevenly realized. At its core, Oblivion has a premise that should get any sci-fi fan's pulse racing. A man doing his routine job on a devastated Earth, discovering clues that nothing is quite what it seems, questioning reality, memory, and his own identity. That's good material. You've got mystery, you've got hints of conspiracy, and you've got that nagging feeling that something bigger is lurking just out of sight. When Julia shows up, everything changes. Suddenly, the neat little world Jack's been maintaining starts to crack. The story isn't just about drones and repairs anymore. It's about trust, memory, and uncovering a truth that's been hidden from him. Those first few discoveries are genuinely compelling. You start asking questions. You start wondering, who can Jack trust, what really happened, and how much of his life has been a lie. The film does a decent job of keeping some of that tension going. It drips information rather than dumping it all at once, and for a while that works. You're curious, you're invested. You're following Jack as he pieces together fragments of his past and the mystery surrounding Earth itself. There's a slow reveal that, in theory, should make you lean forward in your seat. And there are some really clever touches in how the story layers in the mystery. TTLE hints, visual cues, the way objects from the past pop up, the recurring images of Julia in his memory, they all work to build intrigue. It feels like there's more going on than what Jack is being told, and that tension is satisfying in the early stretches. The problem, of course, is that as the movie unfolds, the story doesn't always pay off the way you expect. Some twists are predictable, some revelations are rushed, and a few of the setups feel more convenient than clever. But still, for the first hour or so, the potential is there. The mystery is engaging enough that you want to see how it all ties together. At its best, Oblivion makes you feel like you're uncovering the story alongside Jack. You're not just watching him discover things, you're thinking, wait, hold on, what does this mean? And that's the fun part. Even if the payoff isn't perfect, the structure of the mystery keeps you curious, and for a movie that could have been all spectacle, that's an achievement. So yeah, the story has flaws. It doesn't fully deliver on all of its promises, and some twists feel recycled from other sci-fi movies. But the potential is there, and when it works, the tension, the intrigue, and the sense of discovery make it genuinely watchable, and at times, genuinely enjoyable. Now, this is where Oblivion starts asking for a little too much patience, because for a while, you can go along with the mystery. You can accept that Jack doesn't know everything. You can accept that the world is strange because the movie is clearly hiding something. That's fine. Sci-fi is allowed to hold back information. In fact, that can be the fun part. But there's a difference between mystery and wait. Does that actually make sense? And Oblivion crosses that line a few times. The biggest issue is that once the answers start arriving, they don't clean everything up. Some questions get resolved, sure, but other things just sort of sit there in the corner, hoping you don't look at them too closely. The movie has this beautiful, expensive confidence, but the logic underneath isn't always as solid as the visuals. For example, the scavs. The movie spends a lot of time making them feel like this hidden enemy force, this dangerous presence on the ground. But when the truth starts coming out, you naturally start asking basic questions. Why hide certain information from Jack for so long? Why use such complicated methods? Why not make contact earlier? And if these people have been surviving underground for years, how exactly are they managing it in a world that's supposed to be almost impossible to live in? It's not that every survival detail needs a full documentary explanation. Nobody wants the movie to stop for 10 minutes and explain food storage. But when the whole premise is built on Earth being ruined, empty, and barely functional, those practical questions become harder to ignore. Then there's Julia's arrival. On an emotional level, it works because she connects directly to Jack's dreams and his buried past. But as a plot device, it's very convenient. Out of all the people who could fall from the sky, the one survivor just happens to be the exact person tied to Jack's hidden identity. That's not impossible in a sci-fi story, but the movie wants it to feel profound when, at times, it feels more like the script quietly pushing pieces into place. And that happens a lot. Events don't always unfold because they feel natural. Sometimes they happen because the movie needs the next reveal to happen now. A drone shows up at the right time. A character explains something at the right time. A secret is held back until the most dramatic possible moment, even if holding it back doesn't fully make sense. That kind of writing can work if the emotional payoff is huge. But when the characters are already a little thin, the contrivances stand out more. The larger conflict also raises questions. The movie gives us the broad idea, the big sci-fi explanation, the twist behind the war and the mission. But after the reveal, you may still find yourself thinking, okay, but why exactly did it have to happen this way? The plan feels elaborate, almost too elaborate, and the film doesn't always convince you that this was the cleanest or most logical route. And that's frustrating because the setup is strong, the world is interesting, the atmosphere is strong, the mystery pulls you in, but the more the film explains, the more fragile some of it starts to look. It's like staring at one of those sleek white machines in the movie. From a distance, it looks flawless. Smooth design, perfect surface, everything glowing exactly how it should. But then you step closer and you start seeing the seams. That's Oblivion as storytelling. It gives you enough to stay engaged, but it also leaves enough gaps that you can't fully relax into it. You're watching Jack question his reality, but at the same time, you're questioning the screenplay. And once that happens, the movie loses some of its spell. Not all of it. The film is still watchable. The mystery still has momentum, but those unanswered questions matter because sci-fi worlds need internal logic. They don't have to be realistic in a boring way, but they have to feel consistent. They have to feel like the rules exist even when we don't fully understand them yet. With Oblivion, the rules sometimes feel less like a carefully built system and more like a bridge the movie is constructing while it walks across it. And by the time you reach the other side, yes, you understand the general shape of the story. But you may also be looking back at the path thinking, hold on, that part didn't quite hold. The twists in Oblivion are a weird thing, because they're both the reason the movie stays interesting and the reason it starts to wobble. At first, the mystery works. You can feel the film holding something back, and that's fine. Actually, that's part of the appeal. Jack is confused, we're confused, and the whole world has this polished, artificial feeling where every answer seems like it's hiding another question underneath it. So in the beginning, when the movie starts dropping little cracks into Jack's routine, it's enjoyable. His dreams don't line up with the life he's been told he has. Julia's arrival doesn't make sense. The scavs don't behave exactly the way the mission briefing says they should. Victoria seems completely loyal to the system, but Jack keeps drifting away from it. All of that creates a nice sense of unease. The problem is that Oblivion doesn't stop at one or two reveals. It keeps going. After a while, every new answer feels like it's waiting for another twist to jump out from behind it. And that can be exciting, but it can also become exhausting. You start to feel the movie trying very hard to stay ahead of you, not always in a clever way either. Sometimes it feels less like natural discovery and more like the script saying, but what if everything you just learned was also not quite true? There are definitely reveals here that work. Some of them are neat. Some have a nice sci-fi punch. And if you're watching the movie without thinking too far ahead, a couple of them can still land pretty well. But if you've seen a decent amount of science fiction, you may start guessing the shape of the story before the film gets there. Maybe not every detail, but the broad direction. Yeah, it's not that hard to see coming. Memory wipes, false missions, hidden truths, mysterious survivors, the woman from the dream, these are familiar tools. Oblivion uses them with style, but not always with surprise. And that's where the predictability hurts it, because the movie behaves like its revelations are heavier than they actually are. It pauses for impact. It frames the moment like you're supposed to be stunned, but sometimes you're sitting there thinking, okay, yes, I kind of figured we were heading there. Then, on the other side, some parts are not predictable so much as just messy. The plot starts stacking information quickly, especially later on, and the clean visual style doesn't match how tangled the storytelling becomes. You get explanations, then reversals, then emotional reveals, then more science fiction mechanics, and not all of it has time to breathe. That's probably why the final stretch divides people so much. For some viewers, the twists make the movie more engaging. They give it energy. They keep it from becoming just a pretty film about Tom Cruise fixing machines in the desert. For others, the twists make the movie feel artificial, like it's building excitement by moving the furniture around rather than deepening the story. And I think both reactions make sense. The mystery is one of the better reasons to keep watching Oblivion, but it's also one of the reasons the movie never fully becomes great. It has enough questions to pull you in, but not enough truly fresh answers to knock you back. It wants that big, mind-bending sci-fi feeling, but too many of its tricks feel like they came from a shelf-marked, classic genre reveals. So by the time everything is laid out, you're not completely lost, but you may not be fully satisfied either. The movie does explain itself. It does connect most of the major pieces, but the experience can feel strangely uneven, sometimes intriguing, sometimes obvious, sometimes confusing for the wrong reasons. That's the tricky thing about twists. They're not automatically depth. A twist can change the plot, but it doesn't always make the story richer. And with Oblivion, the best moments are not always the big reveals. Sometimes the strongest moments are the quieter ones before the answers arrive. Jack staring out at a world he's supposed to abandon, wondering why it still feels like home. Pacing is one of the strange things about Oblivion, because the movie doesn't feel slow in a simple way. It's not dead on arrival. It doesn't just sit there doing nothing. There's always something happening visually, always some machine humming, some mission unfolding, some mystery being hinted at. But dramatically, that's where it gets uneven. The first act actually works pretty well for me. Jack's routine has a rhythm to it. He wakes up, checks in with Victoria, flies down to the surface, repairs drones, avoids danger, collects little pieces of the old world, then returns to this perfect glass house in the sky. It's repetitive, yes, but in the beginning that repetition has a purpose. It shows us the shape of his life. It lets us feel how controlled and isolated everything is. And honestly, for a while, that's enough. There's something hypnotic about watching him move through this empty planet. The movie takes its time showing the silence, the distance, the routine. It lets the world breathe. You get the feeling that Jack has done this same thing hundreds of times, and that maybe the real tension isn't outside him, but inside his head. The issue is that the movie stays in that mode a little too long. After a while, the calm starts to become flat. The mystery is still there, but the story doesn't always push hard enough. You're waiting for the film to shift gears, to really tighten its grip, to make the danger feel urgent. And instead, it sometimes drifts. Beautifully, sure, but still drifting. That second stretch is where some viewers are probably going to feel the length. Jack flies somewhere. Jack fixes something. Jack looks troubled. Victoria checks in. Another small clue appears. It's not boring in the sense that nothing is on screen, because the movie always looks incredible. But emotionally, it can feel like the film is circling the runway instead of landing. Then when the bigger revelations start arriving, the pacing almost has the opposite problem. Suddenly the movie has a lot to explain. The plot begins throwing information at you faster, the twists start stacking up, and the emotional beats don't always get enough room. So the first half can feel too patient, and the second half can feel too crowded. That's a tricky combination. It's like Oblivion wants to be both a slow burn mystery and a big blockbuster sci-fi thriller, but it doesn't always know when to be which. The quiet scenes are sometimes too quiet. The action scenes sometimes arrive without enough dramatic buildup. And the major reveals, which should feel huge, occasionally feel like they're being rushed through because the movie has more plot mechanics to handle. That's why the dramatic momentum is a bit inconsistent. Some scenes pull you in. Jack discovering something he shouldn't know, Julia appearing from the wreckage, the uneasy distance growing between him and Victoria. Those moments have tension because they disturb the routine. They make the polished world feel unstable, but other parts just don't build in the same way. The movie has atmosphere, but atmosphere is not the same thing as momentum. You can admire the frame and still feel like the story is taking its sweet time getting somewhere. And yet, I wouldn't say the pacing completely kills the film. It's still watchable. It still has enough mystery to keep you around. If you're already invested in the visuals and the world, you might not mind the slower parts as much. Some people may even enjoy that cleaner, more patient rhythm. But if you're waiting for the film to truly catch fire, that moment may come later than expected, or maybe not strongly enough at all. That's the frustrating thing. Oblivion has all the pieces for momentum: mystery, danger, memory loss, a ruined Earth, hidden enemies, a woman from Jack's dreams, a mission that may be false. It should feel like a tightening knot. Instead, it sometimes feels like a gorgeous machine running at the wrong speed, not broken, just uneven. And by the time the final act starts moving faster, the movie has already lost a little of the pressure it needed. You're still interested, but maybe not breathless. You're still watching, but not completely locked in. For a film with this much scale, this much mystery, and this much visual power, you want the drama to hit harder than it does. All right, let's dive into the action and suspense, because this is one of those areas where Oblivion does some things right, and some things just feel a little safe. The movie has a few genuinely thrilling moments. Watching Jack pilot his little craft across the ruined landscape, chasing or being chased by drones, is surprisingly tense. Even though you know Cruz isn't really going to get killed, there's a nice sense of speed and danger in the way the sequences are shot. The drones themselves are small but menacing, and the way they swoop in or attack gives you that little rush, that tightness in your chest. Then there's the suspense of the mystery itself. Julia's crash, Jack's glimpses of memories, the hidden truths about the scavs, it all adds a layer of tension beyond the mechanical action. Who you can trust, you're invested in what Jack will discover next. That part of the movie works really well because it mixes curiosity with a subtle sense of unease, but at the same time, some of the action doesn't quite land. The big sequences are often more polished than emotional. You admire the choreography and the way the camera moves, but the stakes don't always feel real. You're watching, but your pulse might not jump as much as it could. It's visually impressive, but it sometimes lacks that gut punch tension that makes you truly lean in. And the suspense isn't always consistent either. Some moments are thrilling because they're quiet, like a drone suddenly appearing in a barren valley, and some are meant to feel intense but are over-explained or telegraphed. That mix makes the film a little uneven. You're invested, but you're also sometimes aware that the movie is guiding you too much rather than letting danger feel unpredictable. That said, there are moments where the camera work, the choreography, and the design of the drones combine beautifully. You get real enjoyment out of those sequences. And the smaller suspense beats, the hidden cabin, Jack sneaking around, the surprise reveals, help keep the tension alive even when the big action set pieces don't fully deliver. Overall, the action and suspense in Oblivion are satisfying enough to keep you watching. They don't redefine the genre or make your heart pound constantly, but they're well executed, fun, and in a world this beautiful and empty, they feel appropriate. You get the thrills without it ever feeling ridiculous or over the top, which in some ways makes it feel a little more grounded than a lot of other sci-fi blockbusters. It's not perfect, but it works. And honestly, in a movie that's as visually mesmerizing as this one, that's enough to keep the ride enjoyable. Joseph Kosinski's direction is probably the easiest thing to admire in Oblivion, and at the same time, one of the harder things to fully defend. Because visually, he knows exactly what he's doing. You can feel his control over the world from the first few scenes. The spaces are clean, the technology has shape and purpose, the landscapes are framed with this almost architectural precision. Nothing feels random. Jack's home in the sky, the aircraft, the drones, the empty earth below, it all has a very specific visual language. You can tell Kosinski cares about design, not just in a make-it-look-cool way, but in a way where every room and every machine seems to belong to the same future. And that's where the movie is genuinely strong. It has identity on the surface. You could take one frame from Oblivion and probably know what film it comes from. That matters. A lot of modern blockbusters are expensive but visually forgettable. This one is expensive and actually has a look. Kosinski also understands silence. Some of the best moments in the film are not the loud ones. They're Jack flying over the ruins, walking through dead landscapes, standing in places where human life used to be. The movie gives those images space. It lets the emptiness sit there. And for a while, that creates a real mood, lonely, polished, slightly eerie. But then comes the other side of it. As controlled as the direction is visually, the drama doesn't always have the same force. Kosinski builds a beautiful world, but he doesn't always make the people inside that world feel as alive as the machines around them. That's the strange imbalance of Oblivion. The aircraft feels fully designed, the pool feels fully designed, the drones feel fully designed, but some of the emotional beats feel like they still needed another draft. And you notice it most when the story starts asking for real impact. The reveals should hit harder. The love story should feel more painful. Jack's identity crisis should shake the movie more than it does. Instead, the direction sometimes keeps everything at this smooth, elegant distance. It looks amazing, but it doesn't always bleed. That doesn't mean Kosinski fails. I wouldn't say that. He keeps the film watchable, sometimes even hypnotic. He gives the mystery enough atmosphere to pull you along, and he clearly knows how to stage a sci-fi world with scale and style. There are directors who would have made this material look generic. Kosinski definitely doesn't. But he also doesn't completely solve the script's problems. He can make a weak explanation look beautiful, but he can't make it feel completely satisfying. He can frame a twist with confidence, but if the twist feels familiar, the camera can only do so much. And he can create an elegant future, but elegance is not the same as emotional depth. That's really the story of his direction here. He is excellent at creating a world you want to look at. He is less successful at making every part of that world matter. Still, there's something impressive about the ambition. Oblivion is not sloppy. It's not lazy in its craft. It has taste. It has rhythm. It has a clear visual imagination behind it. Even when the narrative feels borrowed or thin, the filmmaking has enough confidence to keep you engaged. So with Kosinski, I land somewhere in the middle. As a visual director, he gives Oblivion its strongest identity. As a storyteller, he doesn't always get the emotion and tension to rise to the level of the images. The result is a film that feels meticulously built, beautifully staged, and occasionally hollow, like a perfect futuristic house where you're still waiting for someone to really live in it. Now, if you've watched enough sci-fi, and let's be honest, most of us have, you're going to notice something pretty immediately about Oblivion. It wears its influences on its sleeve. I mean, it's obvious. The memory wipes, Total Recall. The single surviving human with a hidden past, also Total Recall. The lone technician wandering a post-apocalyptic Earth, a little Wall-E vibe in there, especially with the Plantinican thing. The big, gleaming futuristic stations. Tron and 2001, A Space Odyssey definitely left their fingerprints. Even the whole, is this world real or is it a lie? Twist feels like echoes of Moon and The Matrix, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. Kosinski is clearly paying homage to the films he loves. You can see the reverence in every frame, in the architecture of the stations, the design of the drones, the scale of the destroyed cities. It's like he's saying, I love these films and I want to play in that sandbox. But here's the tricky part. At some point, homage starts feeling less like tribute and more like repetition. Some moments in Oblivion are so clearly inspired by older sci-fi that they feel like déjà vu. You get a sense of, yep, I've seen that beat before. And the more you notice it, the more it can make the movie feel familiar rather than fresh. And it's not just the visuals or plot points. Even some of the big reveals feel borrowed. You can see where they're coming from, and while they're executed well enough to keep your attention, they don't surprise you in the way they might if you hadn't seen their predecessors. At the same time, I can't completely knock it for this. Sci-fi is a genre built on ideas being reinterpreted, revisited, and reimagined. The problem is when a movie leans too heavily on those echoes without putting enough of its own voice into them. Oblivion sometimes feels like a collage of classic sci-fi, beautifully rendered, but not always with the heart or originality to make it entirely its own. Still, for fans of the genre, spotting the influences can be kind of fun. You find yourself nodding along, recognizing little visual cues or narrative beats, appreciating how Kosinski blends them into his own version of the story. It's like a conversation with decades of science fiction, even if the movie occasionally gets a bit too comfortable sitting in the shadow of its inspirations. So yeah, influences everywhere, but executed with enough polish and style that it's enjoyable, even if it's not revolutionary. And that brings us to one of the biggest problems with Oblivion. It looks original before it starts feeling familiar. That's the strange thing. On the surface, this movie has its own identity. The white sky tower, the ruined Earth, the drones, Jack's bubble ship, the lonely cabin by the lake, all of that gives the film a very specific look. You don't confuse Oblivion with something cheap or generic. It has style. It has atmosphere. It has that expensive, carefully designed sci-fi elegance. But once the story starts unfolding, you begin to feel the machinery of other movies underneath it. Memory wipes, false missions, hidden truths, a man discovering that his life is not what he was told, a supposedly dead Earth, a mysterious woman from his dreams, humans hiding where they shouldn't be, a system built on lies. These are not bad ideas, but they are very familiar ideas, and Oblivion doesn't always reshape them enough to make them feel new. That's where the movie becomes a little frustrating, because inspiration is not the problem. Every sci-fi movie borrows from something. That's how genres work. one film talks to another. Ideas get reused, challenged, flipped around, dressed in new technology. There's nothing wrong with that. The issue is that Oblivion often feels like it is borrowing the ingredients without fully creating its own flavor. It has the shape of a thoughtful science fiction story. It has the serious tone, the lonely hero, the big questions about identity and memory, the sleek future, the destroyed world. It wants to feel meaningful. You can tell it wants to stand alongside the kind of sci-fi that makes you leave the theater thinking about humanity, technology, and the cost of survival. But too often it feels like a beautifully polished remix, not a disaster, not lazy exactly, more like a film that has been assembled from very good pieces, but the pieces are still recognizable. You can see the seams. You can feel the influences pressing through the surface, and once you notice that, some of the emotional impact gets weaker, because a twist only hits hard when it feels earned. A world only feels powerful when its rules feel fresh or deeply lived in. A hero's journey only feels special when it belongs to him, not to a dozen other stories we've already watched. That's why the phrase style over substance keeps hovering around this movie. It's not completely fair because there is substance here. There are ideas. There is a real attempt to talk about memory, history, control, and what it means to hold onto the past. But the substance is buried under familiar storytelling patterns. The movie keeps reaching for something profound, and sometimes it almost touches it. Jack standing in the ruins, saving old objects, refusing to emotionally abandon Earth, that works. That feels personal. That feels like the movie finding its own heartbeat. Then the plot kicks back in, and suddenly we're back in a maze of genre references, convenient reveals, and sci-fi concepts that other films have handled with more surprise or more emotional force. So Oblivion ends up in this odd middle place. It's too well-made to dismiss, but too derivative to fully admire, too stylish to be boring, but too familiar to be truly exciting. It's not a copy with no personality, but it also isn't bold enough to escape the shadow of the movies that clearly inspired it. And maybe that's the real disappointment. Because when a film looks this good, when it has this much craft behind it, you want the story to feel just as fresh as the images. You want the soul to match the surface. Instead, Oblivion gives us a futuristic world that looks brand new, wrapped around a story that feels like it has been here before. What Oblivion is really reaching for, underneath all the drones and shiny technology, is memory. That's the idea that gives the movie its strongest pulse. Jack Harper is not just a man doing a job, he's a man with pieces missing. His past has been wiped clean, at least officially, and yet something keeps coming back. A face, a place. A feeling, dreams that don't behave like dreams. They feel more like evidence. And that's interesting because the world around Jack is built on forgetting. Earth is treated like a finished chapter. Humanity has moved on. The old cities are ruins, the old culture is debris, and the people still working there are supposed to see the planet as a resource site, nothing more. Do the job, follow the orders, leave when the mission ends. But Jack can't do that. He keeps looking at Earth like it still belongs to him, not in a grand patriotic way, not with speeches, but in small private gestures. He saves objects, he keeps books, he listens to old music. He builds a little hidden life in that cabin by the lake, away from the sterile world he's supposed to accept. And honestly, those details tell us more about him than most of the plot explanations do. That cabin is where Jack feels most human. Up in the sky, everything is clean and controlled. Down there, surrounded by old things, he feels connected to something real. It's not just nostalgia, it's identity. The movie seems to understand that who we are is partly made from what we remember, what we keep, what we refuse to throw away. And that's why his memory flashes matter. They're not only clues for the mystery. They're fragments of a self trying to survive. The system can erase his mind, give him a uniform, assign him a mission, place him inside a perfect glass house, but it can't fully erase the emotional truth buried inside him. That's the part of Oblivion I wish the film trusted more, because the theme is strong, really strong. What happens to a person when their memories are taken? Can love survive if the mind forgets, but something deeper still recognizes it? Can humanity move forward if it cuts itself off completely from its past? These are big questions, and the movie touches them often, sometimes beautifully. The title itself carries that weight. Oblivion is not just about a destroyed Earth. It's about erasure, forgetting, a world being pushed out of memory, a man being separated from his own life, a future that has become so clean and efficient that it has almost scrubbed away the messy, emotional, historical parts of being human. That's why Jack's little relics matter. A book, a record, a baseball cap, a plant, a song, small things, but in this kind of world they feel huge. They are proof that humanity was more than survival plans and machines. People lived here. They played games, they wrote poems, they fell in love, they made music, they left fingerprints. and Jack, even without fully understanding why, refuses to let that disappear. The frustrating thing is that the movie sometimes pushes this beautiful idea into the background so it can get back to plot twists. It has a rich emotional theme sitting right there, but it doesn't always dig in. Owe it with the depth it deserves. Instead of staying with Jack's inner conflict, it often races toward the next revelation. Still, when Oblivion slows down and lets this theme breathe, it works. Jack staring at the remains of Earth. Jack hiding old objects like treasures. Jack sensing that his life is not complete because his past has been stolen from him. Those are the moments where the movie feels closest to something genuinely moving. Because in the end, memory is not just information. It's not a file you can delete and replace. It's the root of identity. And Oblivion, at its best, understands that losing memory is not only losing the past. It is losing the map that tells you who you are. What I like about Oblivion, at least in theory, is that it understands something very simple about the future. The cleaner everything becomes, the easier it is to lose the mess that made us human. Jack's world is almost too perfect. Everything around him is smooth, white, efficient, controlled. His home in the sky looks like a place designed by people who decided emotion was a design flaw. No dust, no clutter, no old photos lying around, no weird little objects on shelves. Just polished surfaces, clean uniforms, mission updates, and a voice from above telling everyone to stay on task. And then you compare that to the things Jack secretly keeps. Books, records, random relics, old pieces of Earth that probably mean nothing to the mission, but mean everything to him. He doesn't fully understand why he's drawn to them, but he is. And that's important because those objects are not just decoration. They're proof that the world before the war had texture. People read, people listened to music. People kept memories in physical things. They didn't just exist inside perfect systems. That's where the movie finds one of its better ideas. Technology in Oblivion is impressive, but it's also cold. It does everything it's supposed to do. It monitors, it controls, it repairs, it kills. It keeps Jack and Victoria moving through their routine like two employees trapped inside the most beautiful workplace ever built. The machines are clean and powerful, but they don't feel alive. Jack's hidden cabin, though, that feels alive. It's imperfect. It's warm. It's full of things that don't belong in the official version of his life. A song playing in that cabin says more about humanity than all the mission briefings in the world. A paper book, in a future where paper probably seems useless, suddenly feels almost sacred. It becomes a small act of rebellion. Not loud rebellion, not blow up the system rebellion, more like a man quietly saying, "No, this mattered." And that's the emotional contrast the film keeps circling. Progress without memory becomes emptiness. Technology without culture becomes control. A future that forgets its past may look beautiful, but it can also feel sterile, lonely, almost dead. The movie doesn't always explore this as deeply as it could. Sometimes it gets distracted by the twists and the action and all the big sci-fi machinery. But the idea is there, and when it comes through, it gives Oblivion a little more soul. Because Jack isn't just trying to solve a mystery. He's trying to hold on to humanity without even realizing it. The old music, the books, the baseball memories, the little objects he collects, these are pieces of identity. They remind us that civilization is not only buildings and machines and survival plans. It's also songs, stories, habits, jokes, clothes, places, smells, stupid souvenirs, all the tiny things people carry with them because they make life feel real. And maybe that's why Jack can't fully accept the world he's been given. The technology around him tells him to move forward, forget Earth, finish the mission, leave the past behind. But everything human inside him keeps pulling him back. There's also an environmental idea sitting inside Oblivion, although I'm not sure it's the movie's strongest one. On the surface, this is a story about a ruined Earth. The planet has been devastated by war, disasters, weapons, and extraction. The oceans are being used, the land is broken, and humanity has supposedly reached the point where home is no longer home. It's not just damaged, it's been written off. That alone should feel heavy. Because the image of Earth being treated like an abandoned worksite is genuinely unsettling. Jack flies over what used to be civilization, but now it's mostly silence, machinery, and ruins. There's something sad about that. The idea that mankind could survive, but lose the planet in the process has a real sting to it. But the movie's ecological message is a little strange, because it feels both important and underdeveloped. It clearly wants us to think about what happens when a world is drained, broken, and treated only as a resource. You can feel that in the giant machines pulling from the oceans, in the empty landscapes, in the way Earth is no longer described as a living place, but as something useful until the mission ends. And that's a strong image. The problem is, the film doesn't always trust that image to speak for itself. At times, the environmental angle feels a bit obvious, almost like the movie is pointing toward a lesson we already understand. Don't destroy the planet, don't let technology and war consume everything, don't reduce Earth to fuel. Fair enough, true, obviously, but also not exactly fresh. What's more interesting is Jack's personal reaction to the planet. He doesn't look at Earth like a dead object. He looks at it like a wounded home. That's where the environmental idea actually works best, not as a big message, but as a feeling. He sees value where everyone else sees damage. He finds life in small things. A plant, a patch of soil, a quiet lake, an old cabin. These details matter because they suggest Earth is not only something to escape from, it is something worth remembering, maybe even worth fighting for. And honestly, that angle is much more powerful than any broad ecological warning, because the movie is not at its best when it's giving us a lesson. It's at its best when it shows one man refusing to emotionally abandon a ruined world. That says more than any speech could. It makes the loss of Earth feel personal, not political, not abstract, not just background lore. Still, I wish the film had gone deeper with it. The destroyed planet is beautiful, yes, but sometimes maybe too beautiful. The damage becomes scenery. Gorgeous scenery, but scenery. You admire the ruins more than mourn them. And for a movie about Earth being lost, that creates a weird distance. It's visually breathtaking, but not always emotionally devastating. So the environmental theme is there. It's part of the foundation. War, resource extraction, ecological collapse, humanity leaving its own planet behind, all of that gives Oblivion a darker edge. But like a lot of the movie's big ideas, it feels partly buried under the plot mechanics. The film touches something meaningful, then moves on to another reveal, another mission, another piece of sci-fi machinery. And maybe that's the missed opportunity. The strongest version of Oblivion would have treated Earth not just as a beautiful wasteland, but as the emotional center of the story. Not just a place where the plot happens, but a home that still has a heartbeat, even after everyone else has been told to forget it. The writing in Oblivion is a bit of a mixed bag because the movie clearly has ideas. It's not empty. It's not just explosions and shiny machines. There is a real attempt here to build mystery, emotion, identity, memory, and this lonely post-apocalyptic world. But when you get down to the actual dialogue, yeah, that's where the cracks show. A lot of the conversations feel very functional. Characters often say exactly what the scene needs them to say, and then the movie moves on. It gets the job done, sure, but it doesn't always feel like people talking. It feels like plot delivery, mission updates, warnings, explanations, emotional declarations that arrive because the story needs them, not always because the moment has naturally earned them. And that's frustrating because the world itself is so carefully built. You can look at a room in this movie and understand something about the characters. You can look at Jack's cabin and feel his connection to the past. You can watch Victoria in that clean white control space and understand her loyalty to the system. Visually, the film knows how to communicate, but then the dialogue comes in, and sometimes it says things the images already told us better. The opening narration is probably the biggest example. Instead of letting us slowly discover the world, the movie explains the war, the mission, the scavs, the memory wipe, the whole situation. It's not impossible to follow. That's not the issue. The issue is that it feels too direct, too clean, almost too eager to make sure nobody gets lost. And weirdly, even with all that explaining, the movie still leaves behind questions later. That's the odd contradiction in the writing. It overexplains the setup, but underexplains parts of the logic. We get a lot of information, but not always the right information. Some scenes tell us things we could have figured out ourselves, while other scenes skip over details that actually matter for the world to make sense. The character interactions also needed more life. Jack and Victoria have an interesting dynamic, but their conversations can feel stiff. That stiffness partly fits the story, because their life is controlled and artificial, but there's a difference between intentional emotional distance and dialogue that simply doesn't have enough texture. You want a little more tension under the words, more history, more discomfort, more of the small human details that make a relationship feel lived in. With Julia, the problem is slightly different. Her role is emotionally important, but the writing doesn't always give her enough space beyond the mystery she represents. So when the movie asks us to care deeply about that connection, it sometimes feels like it's leaning on the idea of romance more than the actual development of it. And Morgan Freeman, he has presence. Of course he does, but some of his scenes feel like the movie saying, here is the man who explains the truth now. He brings weight to the role because he's Morgan Freeman, but the writing around him is pretty thin. That's the thing with Oblivion. The screenplay has strong concepts, but not always strong dramatic language. It knows the shape of a serious sci-fi story. It knows when to introduce mystery, when to reveal information, when to create a big emotional turn. But the line-by-line writing can feel plain, sometimes cliched, sometimes too mechanical. And for a movie about memory and identity, that matters, because those themes need intimacy. They need conversations that feel personal. They need moments where the silence, the hesitation, the half-said thing carries emotional weight. Sometimes Oblivion gets there through visuals, but through dialogue, not consistently. Still, I wouldn't call the writing disastrous. It's more frustrating than terrible. There are good ideas buried in it. There are moments that work. The mystery keeps moving, the premise has weight, and the film does create curiosity. But the script often feels like it needed one more pass, not to make the plot bigger, but to make the people sharper, to make the emotional beats less polished and more painful, to let characters speak like they have lived through something, not just like they're standing inside a beautifully designed sci-fi machine waiting for the next reveal. Because in the end, Oblivion has the bones of a thoughtful science fiction film. It just doesn't always have the dialogue to make those bones feel alive. The final act of Oblivion is where the movie really divides people, because depending on how much you've bought into the mystery, the ending can either feel satisfying enough, or it can feel like the film is trying very hard to make you feel something that hasn't completely been earned. For a while, the movie builds toward this big unraveling. Jack has been following orders, repairing drones, believing in the mission, trusting the world as it was explained to him. Then the cracks widen, the truth starts coming out. The story shifts from routine survival into full sci-fi revelation mode, and to be fair, some of that works. There is a certain pleasure in watching the pieces finally lock into place. The film has been teasing questions about Jack, Julia, Victoria, the scavs, the Tet, the war, the memories, all of it. So when the answers arrive, there's a natural curiosity to see how the movie connects everything. You want the payoff. You want that okay, now I understand moment. But the problem is, once the movie starts explaining itself, it almost explains too quickly. The final stretch has a lot to handle. Emotional reveals, identity questions, action beats, sacrifices, the larger truth behind the conflict, and then the actual closing movement of the story. That is a lot of weight for one final act to carry, and sometimes you can feel the movie rushing through material that needed more space. Some twists land, others feel a little too familiar, and a few moments feel like the film is asking us to be shocked when, honestly, many viewers may already be 2 steps ahead. That's especially tricky because Oblivion has such a serious, grand tone. It frames its ending like something deeply moving and almost mythic. But if you're not fully emotionally connected to the characters, the big final gestures don't hit with the force they should. The ending also has that polished Hollywood neatness to it. Not completely clean, not completely simple, but there's a sweetness there that may not work for everyone. The film spends so much time building this cold, lonely, slightly haunting atmosphere, and then the final emotional resolution feels a bit softer, maybe even too soft, compared to the world it created. Some viewers will like that. They'll see it as hopeful, romantic, and fitting for Jack's journey. Others may feel the movie backs away from the darker, stranger version of itself, and I understand both reactions. There is something appealing about ending a story like this with a sense of closure. After all the erased memories, false histories, and broken identities, the movie clearly wants to leave us with the idea that something human can survive. Love, memory, home, identity, those things don't just disappear because a system tells them to. That's a good idea. Actually, it's probably the most emotionally honest idea in the film, but the execution is where I hesitate. The final confrontation feels big, but not always intense. The sacrifice has meaning, but not quite the emotional punch it could have had. The closing moments are memorable in concept, but depending on your tolerance for sentiment, they may feel either touching or a little too convenient. And that sums up the final act pretty well. Strong concept, mixed impact. It does complete the story. It answers the main questions. It gives Jack's journey a clear destination. It tries to pull together the mystery, the romance, and the human theme underneath all the science fiction machinery, but it also exposes some of the movie's weaknesses. The thin character development, the borrowed sci-fi ideas, the rushed explanations, the feeling that the film wants to be profound but doesn't always give its profundity enough time to breathe. So when the credits roll, you're not left with nothing. There is an ending here. There is emotion here. There is a real attempt to make the story mean something, but whether it truly lands depends on how much of your heart the movie had already won before it got there. And for me, Oblivion gets close. It builds a beautiful road to its finale. I just wish the destination felt as powerful as the journey kept promising. All right, let's step back and look at what Oblivion really does well, because even with all its flaws, the movie has some undeniable strengths. First and foremost, it's a visual feast. From the very first shot, the film makes you sit up and take notice. The The post-apocalyptic landscapes, the floating platforms, the ruined cities, it's all meticulously designed. Every frame feels intentional. There's a clarity and polish to the world building that you don't see in every blockbuster. Even when the story wobbles, the visuals keep you engaged. Then there's the cast. Tom Cruise, of course, carries the film, but he's supported by a strong ensemble. Andrea Riseborough is quietly compelling. Olga Kurylenko brings mystery and presence, and Morgan Freeman always adds weight, even when his screen time is limited. The actors may not always have fully fleshed out material, but their performances give the movie credibility. You believe the stakes because these characters feel grounded, even in such a stylized world. The score and sound design also deserve a mention. M83's music is haunting and atmospheric, perfectly complementing the visual tone. The drones, the machinery, the hum of the outpost, they all add to the immersive experience. There's tension, mystery, and subtle emotional beats woven into the soundscape that make the film feel alive beyond just what you see. And even with all the story issues, Oblivion knows how to tease intrigue. Jack's memory fragments, Julia's arrival, the scavs, the hidden truths, they all pull you forward. There's a curiosity factor that keeps you watching, even if some of the explanations are clunky. It's enough to make you invested in the journey, if not completely satisfied with the destination. Finally, the movie does a remarkable job with tone and atmosphere. It balances loneliness, wonder, and suspense in a way that's rare for a big-budget sci-fi. The quiet scenes, the flying over the ruins, Jack's hidden cabin, the lakeside moments, give the film breathing room. It's meditative at times, which contrasts nicely with the action and mystery. That's part of what makes it memorable. So yes, Oblivion has issues. It's derivative in places, the story can be confusing, and the characters aren't always fully realized. But the visuals, the sound, the performances, the atmosphere, they all work together to create a film that's still compelling and watchable. It's a movie that sticks in your mind, at least visually and emotionally, even if it doesn't fully stick the landing narratively. At its best, Oblivion is gorgeous, immersive, and thoughtful. At its worst, it's a little familiar and occasionally frustrating. But overall, it's a strong, stylish, and entertaining sci-fi experience that's worth watching, especially if you're a fan of Tom Cruise or visually driven futuristic worlds. Now, for all its strengths, Oblivion definitely has some weaknesses that can't be ignored. The first and biggest one is the story itself. It's ambitious, sure, but it's also familiar. Memory wipes hidden truths, the lone human questioning their reality. These are ideas we've seen done better in other films. The movie borrows heavily from classic sci-fi, and while the execution is polished, it sometimes feels derivative. That sense of déjà vu can dampen the impact of the twists, making them feel like clever references rather than genuine surprises. Character development is another area where the film struggles. Jack Harper is interesting, but the supporting cast, while talented, is underused. Riseborough, Kurylenko, Freeman, they all bring presence, but the script rarely lets them breathe or grow. The love story feels more like an idea than a lived-in relationship, and a few peripheral characters exist mainly to deliver plot points rather than feel like real people. That emotional distance makes it harder to invest fully in the stakes. Then there's pacing. The first half moves deliberately, which works for atmosphere, but it lingers too long on routine and exposition. The later half suddenly tries to cram in action, twists, and explanations, and it feels uneven. Some sequences could have benefited from more tension, while others feel rushed. The dramatic momentum is inconsistent, which makes it harder to stay fully engaged at times. Dialogue and writing quality also have their issues. Voiceovers over-explain things at the beginning, and conversations often feel functional rather than natural. Some lines are cliched or mechanical, and the script occasionally prioritizes plot mechanics over real emotional depth. That's particularly noticeable in interactions between Jack and Victoria, or Jack and Julia, where the dialogue could have done more to convey the internal stakes. Finally, there are the plot holes and contrivances. Some events happen because the story needs them to, rather than because they make sense in world. Convenient coincidences, unexplained logistics, and unanswered questions linger, especially around the scavs and the larger mission. The movie gives you glimpses of a fascinating future, but it sometimes struggles to make the rules of that world feel fully coherent. So yes, Oblivion has flaws. The story is familiar, the characters aren't always fleshed out, the pacing wavers, and the writing occasionally leans too much on explanation over emotion. But even with these weaknesses, the movie's strengths, its visuals, performances, and immersive atmosphere, make it compelling enough to watch. It's just that while it looks and sounds spectacular, the narrative doesn't always reach the same heights. So here's my final take on Oblivion. At the end of the day, it's a very good-looking movie. Seriously, even if nothing else worked, you could watch it just for the visuals. The ruined landscapes, the floating platforms, the clean, futuristic design of Jack and Victoria's world, it all looks incredible. The cinematography, the CGI, the production design, the little touches in the costumes and sets, they create a world that feels complete and immersive. You can lose yourself in it, and often that's enough to carry you through. The performances help too. Tom Cruise is steady, capable, and believable as Jack Harper. He brings just enough humanity to make you care about what's happening, even when the plot is a little shaky. Riceboro, Kurylenko, Freeman, they all add credibility and weight, even if the script doesn't give them the space they deserve. And the soundtrack, the drones, the sound design, it all pulls you in further. Oblivion is sensory-rich in a way that makes it watchable from start to finish. But here's the catch, it's not great. The story is derivative, the twists are familiar, and the emotional core doesn't fully land. The pacing wobbles between quiet, reflective moments and rushed reveals, leaving some parts feeling uneven. The dialogue is functional, often over-explanatory, and the supporting characters never quite feel fully realized. And yes, there are plot holes and convenient contrivances that can pull you out of the world when you start thinking too hard. In short, it's a movie that looks and sounds much better than it ultimately feels. It's entertaining, and for fans of visually driven sci-fi, it's worth watching. It has enough intrigue, suspense, and aesthetic brilliance to hold your attention. But the emotional resonance, the originality, the narrative punch, it doesn't fully stick the landing. So here's my takeaway. Oblivion is watchable, engaging, and undeniably gorgeous, but it falls short of being truly great. Go in for the visuals, enjoy Tom Cruise navigating a ruined Earth, and soak in the design and atmosphere. Just don't expect a sci-fi masterpiece that will stay with you long after the credits roll. It's a beautiful, polished ride, but not quite one you'll remember as essential.